The rabbit hole is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, tax, or financial advice. The program's participants are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from acting on the information contained within this program. All discussions and disclosures are part of the public record. We ask that listeners respect the privacy of the individuals participating or named in each episode. Thank you.
Welcome to the Rabbit Hole Podcast.
Down the rabbit hole we go.
Welcome to the Rabbit Hole with your hosts Marty and Andy.
We begin in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Well, welcome to this episode of the Rabbit Hole Podcast. I feel good about this episode. We are getting to that point where we're taking it up a notch. You know our story. It started out with a bad construction on our home, and in dealing with the courts and the county and all the systems, we realized that this goes way, way, way beyond just building a house and not having a good experience. And, I'm excited about this direction because when we began, I started asking the question, if a builder can operate the way that they are, they must feel empowered by the system to be allowed to do this. And then some other questions started coming up. We thought, we've got a good story here. There's laws broken, potentially lots and lots of laws broken. People seem to be looking the other way. Politicians aren't interested in getting involved. And then we thought, well, the media will. This is a good story. This affects a lot of people. And we found not so much. But you'd say, well, okay, maybe your story's not any good. I get that, But then you turn on the news and it's somebody found a cat in a tree or some other, inconsequential story that nobody's going to pay attention to. And I thought, well, why aren't we breaking through? And so in that kind of quest for the truth, if you will, we thought, well, we're expanding into guests now in our format. And we thought we need somebody who understands the media, who's actually been in the business, understands how decisions are made. And we were fortunate enough to find Rick Dancer. Rick Dancer is going to tell you a little bit about himself. He currently hosts Get Real with Rick Dancer, his own podcast. And he's also working on his own series, The Truth About Timber. He's been kind enough to give us some of his time. And just talking with him the little bit that I have prior to this and on this, prepping for the recording, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Because it was somebody that actually had experience, actually had opinion, and it seemed to me, felt very comfortable expressing his thoughts and asking questions. And so, Rick, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Just give a little bit of background on your whole scene.
Okay, so the Reader's Digest condensed version. First, I wanted to laugh with you because our joke in the news business is always, we always have to have a water skiing squirrel at the end of the newscast. Some stupid little story that people could chuckle about or something like that. And I always thought it was just such dribble and trite. You get 30 minutes and you cut out the commercials and you have very little time in that newscast. And we put some of the dumbest things in there, but we'll talk about that. I was a news anchor.
I actually made the suggestion that we have a small bunny rollerblading at the end because I thought that would draw in viewers. We couldn't make it happen, so I backed off.
Yeah, I was a broadcaster for an ABC affiliate and a CBS too, but for around 30 years. I was a reporter. Started doing everything on my own in a place called Coos Bay, Oregon. A little market on the Oregon coast, and then went to Eugene, where I spent most of my career. So I was a reporter. I reported 5 days a week, and I anchored the news, the main newscasts. So I was the main anchor, but I always was out reporting because, I'm not a dumb guy. I knew if you're out with the people and it's all about ratings, but if I'm out with the people and I'm doing stories about things people care about, then they're going to watch you more. And I had a really high Q rating all the time, which is your popularity rating. And it's because I gave a damn. I liked what I did. I liked people. My mantra is, everybody has a voice and they should use it, whether we agree or not. And that it comes from some dysfunction in my childhood, not being heard and being very quiet. And when I found my voice,
I just think
I mean, it's got to be like the trauma kids, right?
You
Like,
said the dysfunction in your childhood.
yeah, I knew, I know what it feels like to not be heard. So now it's like I spend my career, and I still do that with my podcast, is making sure that people are heard.
yeah, it seems like the people who have been hurt are the most empathetic and the most curious and ask the most questions because you just can't let it lie, right? It's
Right.
like you're almost investigating to find good again.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what that feels like when, even your guys' situation with building, when the frustration you feel, it's like nobody should have to do that. And so with news, it was perfect for me because you're communicating and you're giving information out, but you're also giving that every person you're reporting on, whether it was the survivor of a murder, or I covered courts and cops for years, you're giving them the ability to say their side. And that's what it was like. I don't think it's like that anymore. I mean, because it's just changed. It was always fast paced. When I first started in the business, I would do 5, 6, 7-minute stories. Then the new news director came in, 10 years later, a news director comes in and it's 30-second pops. Minute 30 is the longest you can go. Faster, 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 short things. And it became just like, we were repeating news, doing 3 different newscasts, repeating stories, and everybody's going, how come there's so much weather? I mean, it's like at the beginning of the show, hey, here's what happened today. Well, I was here. I saw that. I don't need to have you spend 3 minutes on telling me what happened today. And when we come back and a little bit later in the newscast, we'll tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. Well, why did they do that? Because everybody watched for weather. So the ratings would get better because you'd always be pushing the weather. So it was always, I used to say to our weatherman, I think I'm just here to keep you from bumping into yourselves. Here you are, then here comes Rick, and then here comes the weather again. And, and it was all about what people wanted to see.
Yeah, that's crazy that you mention it because it was like that when we had less channels. It became like a weather marathon, and you'd have to flip the same couple of news stations to try and find the story. And they even started showing the weather at the same time, the story at the same time, down to the minute. It just became so calculated.
Well, one of the things I think the business has always done wrong is that it assumes, we used to get these reports and it assumes viewers are stupid. And it would say they basically had a junior high mentality, people that watch the news. And I never bought into that because I think, I had a news director one time tell me, if you can learn to write like you talk, you'll be golden in this business. And it was really easy for me. So I was never worried when I wrote a story, whether it sounded profound or something like Diane Sawyer was going to put on the air. It was just like Rick Dancer, here's what happened today. And I did everything the way they said you couldn't do it in journalism school, where I'd start with a question. So what do you think should happen? And it drew people in. And but the professional way was not to do that. So I've never been that guy that followed the rules. You probably already kind of got that.
I have a question.
Go for it.
I'm just wondering, like, how much of that journalism training do you think is about learning how to position for credibility as opposed to find the truth?
Yeah, the latter. Yeah, I think when I was in college and the professor would say something, and my first news director at my station in Eugene. Well, I guess it was actually my second news director. She was really about the truth. I mean, she really was about journalism and good journalism. Ended up going and teaching at the University of Oregon journalism after they fired her from our news director position. And so I think she was about the truth. But I think the industry became so much about a pretty face, a personality, what you wore. You know, as women in the news business, when I was in there, they didn't say much to me at all. You know, I had to keep my hair kind of short. I could never look like this, but you had to look like, you know, the guy next door, suit, tie, that kind of thing. And we'd sit behind a desk and you'd deliver information. And it was so fake, you know? And I used to say, what if we stood up? What if they took the set away and we were just standing there having a conversation with people? No, this is what they expect. But with women, if the woman that I had an anchor I worked with and she one time changed the color of her hair, yeah, there could have been a murder and nobody would have paid any attention. All they were doing was, you know, being catty and calling the station about, why did Lisa change her hair color? You know, nobody cared. It was a performance. It was a show, you know, and so I think we all tried to do, you know, looking back, you know, we always felt like you had to tell the truth. And I remember back in the day, you would like what they do today with one-sided news stories or something. I would have never got away with that. I see some of the stuff that goes out, and I don't watch news anymore. But I mean, I see enough online that you just go, who buys this? And you're never, you know, I mean, every time, if I was to had a story about Kamala on the news, I would have to have a story about Trump as well. And if one was negative, the other one had to be somewhat negative too. You couldn't do positive, and then negative. You know what I mean? My news director would have come out and said, you guys can't do that.
Well, I think there's a balance. I'm just thinking about this from just the economics of it. So like you could say, because I'll check right and I'll check left news sites, not because I'm looking for information. I'm just like curious how they're poking each other. But I'm also thinking from like we talk about corporatocracy, and I'm a free market guy, but a free market guy. Yeah. And I'm wondering if it isn't just easier to say, we're going to give this side this piece of the pie. We're going to give that side this piece of the pie. So it's divided, not just because they want to have people necessarily divided in and of itself, but maybe because that's just easier to manage.
You know what I think it is? I think it's that they have become so corrupt that they are now picking we know what's best for you. And we're going to pick, this is the narrative. This is how it sounds. This is what everybody, and if a news station bucked to the trend and started completely doing, like, let's just say right now, I think I don't know your audience, but, you know, right now it's pretty obvious that nobody's asking Kamala any questions, or they're trying to, but she's not answering. But if Trump didn't answer questions or something like that, it'd be a major story with all the network going after him. They'd be putting pressure on to get him. And they're starting to do that a little bit, but there's a whole different feel to that. And that would have never flown 15, 20 years ago. I mean, you would have, the news director would have called you in and said, you know, you got to, I remember talking to, like, when people were running for office, if I talked to Senator so-and-so, and he was the heir apparent, the sitting guy, the sitting senator. And then you'd have to then get a soundbite from the person running against that person to make it fair. You had to have something on there. That didn't happen anymore. I mean, none of that happens anymore. So I think
getting a final comment on stories doesn't happen anymore. You can't even ask people for comment. They don't want to comment. If it's not completely managed, you don't hear it. So.
Well, even with your situation, you asked me, Marty, when we were talking on the phone, I remember, you were saying, like, you know, you have this story, it's a good story, you take it to the media, and then they don't cover it. The reason they don't cover it, and I think even back in my day, but more so now, is one, they don't have the staff that knows how to cover it, because you got I literally, when I got out of the business, ran for Secretary of State in Oregon and lost. And then I started my own TV show and, you know, kind of started doing video production and that kind of stuff before the podcast came in. So I was still doing that stuff. I'd go to these press events and you would see a photographer, not a reporter, sometimes a reporter, but not very often, walk up. Here's Joe Johnson, mayor of Eugene, standing there. And the photographer would put out a mic, turn on the camera and say, okay, what do you want to say? No questions. It was just a PR thing. Like the person would just start talking. That person would then take that video back to the newsroom. The newsroom had a reporter then who would sit down, look over what the person wanted you to hear. And then that would be the story. And I was like, no, you're not even asking hard stuff. You're asking nothing. You're not asking questions. You're saying, here's your 30 seconds on the PR market on our TV news, and I'm going to pass this off as news. So in your case, it wasn't easy. They're not going to do a story that you have to dig on. They don't have the money and the staff anymore. When I was in the news business, we had in our newsroom, and Eugene's a medium-sized market. We had about 30 people in our newsroom. That's reporters and anchors and photographers, editors, the whole thing. I guess, and there's about 30 people in there. We had a newsroom, I remember I went back later, like a few years later, I went into the newsroom. It had been cut a quarter the size, and I bet they had 10 to 12 people in there. And that's the kind of staff they have. So you just a lot of
stuff, right? So they're rerunning the same bits, and it's a lot of pre-programmed stuff.
And it's nobody. It's not journalism. It's not people going, so what do you think of the new garbage plan here in Eugene? And why did you raise the prices of garbage by 30%? No, it's like well, the person gets on and says, well, we had to raise prices of garbage because of this, and this, and we're just, the bill will be passed on. Well, there's never a why.
Right.
Where does that money go? How come you didn't have enough money from the other budget? And then the other problem for most of these industries, especially in medium to smaller markets, is the people, they don't stay. So they're going through there. So there's no institutional knowledge. There's no, what happened. Why is this event important? Because 20 years ago, this happened and that led up to this. So they don't have any of that kind of framework. Right. And in your story, they don't have the budget to put people on something like that that's a real news story. So you're getting stuff off the AP Wire. You're getting a press release that March of Dimes puts out. You're getting the county commissioners. I will bet you anything that we used to have reporters that my beat was crime and cops. And I sat in courtrooms for the trial, and I sat there a long time for a TV journalist. I mean, I was in the room. I bet they don't do that anymore. They probably go for the end. They don't sit through the whole thing. They don't know what this person said. They're getting the finished product, and then you go out and get the DA, and he says, well, blah, 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 blah. And then if you're lucky, you get the attorney for the criminal, and they've no blah, blah.
There's literally a new newsroom being created where they're just going to go and sit in courtrooms because no one does it anymore. So there's a whole, system being created just to do that. So who's watching these judgments and who's standing in case there is some corruption? You wouldn't know. There's no.
And who's going to the county commissioner meetings and sitting through there and waiting till they're done and then asking a question about the decision they just made, unless it's something really, really big. Yes, it's on, SPC TV, but who in the hell's really watching that? So it's available on a thing, but there's no journalist to digest it, to ask the questions for the public, which is your job as a journalist. Is you're the eyes and ears of your public, not Republicans, not Democrats, not independents, not Green Party. You're the eyes and ears for the community to give a fair assumption of what's going on, or an assertion of what's going on. And that doesn't happen anymore. So you got nobody watching the chicken house. You got county commissioners and city councilors making decisions about things, and nobody knows what's going on because they don't have the resources and the funding, because their ratings are dropping, because they're terrible to watch. That's why I got out of the business. Our numbers were going like nobody's watching this because of Marty's squirrel stuff. The cute kitten. Nobody gives a shit about the cute kitten, and they don't want to.
Competition with content creators, because the problem is there are content creators and they can be a good source of information, but that's not the same as journalism, and there's no standard. So people think that content is the same as news, and that's got to be frustrating.
No, exactly. And then you've got, because most of us content creators, have an opinion. And that's what, I get to do that now. I love it. And then people, still write me in my audience in Oregon that you're not being fair. You're not presenting both sides. That's not my thing anymore. I'm an opinion guy. So the journalism part, I can't make, I get people too. Here, we got this really good story. Can you do this? I don't have the time. And then they can't pay me the money that it would take for me to go in and do an investigative piece on that. It's just expensive because it takes a lot of time. Back in the day, we did that. We had, if we had 30 people in a room, you had one person oftentimes working on a special series of reports while the rest of us were picking up the slack of the daily news. You know what I mean? And if the timber guy was gone and, off working on a timber piece, then I would fill in on whatever else he was supposed to be doing. And same with me. If I had a piece I'm working on, somebody would fill in my beat. But you had beats, you had contacts, you had relationships with people.
You had money coming in too, right? So that's another
revenue. Right.
What about advertising and things like that?
Yeah, I don't. And I haven't been in it for 15 years or so I don't know. But I can, I know how it was when we, Marty also asked me another question, like when we were talking earlier, like, was there ever a situation where, they came and told you couldn't cover a story? And I don't remember that happening very much, but I do remember with car dealers, because our big money was your car dealers. They advertised all the time. And I remember one of the car companies in our community was, a family said they sold them a lemon, and they went to court and they did. And we had a crew covering that. And that our newsroom, I'd never seen salespeople in our newsroom before. And the station manager in and out of that office with the news director. And it was like, and you step back and it was, back for us then, you're going, why are they here? And then part of the reason I got out of the business is because towards the end, it became even worse, where it was just completely a business. I was a reporter, that's what I loved the most, but I was the main anchor. So our news director came in and said, no, I don't want you out on stories. I want you here so we can get your face on TV doing all the cut-ins. So I literally, my job was towards it, the last year was being in the newsroom, answering phones, setting up stories, and then able to go over, hi, coming up at 6, we'll have blah, 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 blah. And it was just all about that. And the station manager he started hiring news directors that had no kahunas, and all they were mouthpiece for the news director or for the station manager. And it was a business. 60 Minutes destroyed television news because 60 Minutes proved that you could make money off of news, and it changed everything. When they became popular, all the other every TV station in the country started realizing this is a moneymaker, because everybody they know the locals are watching local news, so we'll sponsor the local news. But then in doing so, you destroyed local news, because all of a sudden we became, and if we weren't making money, then, and then towards the end, they used to do these stupid series, and they were sponsored by like some travel company. And it was like, it had nothing to do with our community. So here's the travel. Oh, look it, and it was stuff like that, like sponsored by, or they even had, news series that weren't really news series, sponsored by such and such realtor company. Well, it was all about real estate. And it's like, that's what we do now. I do sponsored stuff for people, but I'm open about it. This isn't news. This is this company, here's a story, this company's sponsoring the timber thing. I got timber companies sponsoring it. I'm doing the reporting, and they're not editing what I'm doing, but I know, and I know the story. And yes, they're sponsoring it because they are trusting me to tell the story of what's really going on with timber. But that was never what you did in news prior to the last, maybe 5 years I was in there. You just started seeing it turn into that. So they're not going to be able to cover your story because, one, they don't have the people. 2, they don't have the resources. 3, they don't have the dollars that it takes to do that. And honestly, 4, it's not sexy enough. You know what I mean? And it takes explaining, and they really do look at people in the audience as stupid. And that, they don't want that. And here's always was my question. Did we train people to have a 30-second attention span as a society? Or did they always have a 30-second attention span? Because here's the thing. Joe Rogan's kind of revealed something. People are willing to sit for that hour to watch what we're doing here. But if you give them short, then do they get used to and they don't want to sit and watch the hour-long or the 3-hour-long podcast? We live in a really weird world where reels and shorts are huge, but then you'll still get people to watch an hour-long podcast or me to sit today, listening to Jordan Peterson or whoever for hours because I'm listening to a conversation. I want to think that we live in a culture that people are starting to get back with. I don't want your sound bites because you're just telling me what I should think. I want to hear the whole conversation, and then I'll make up my own mind. God, I pray that's what it is, because I think we're seeing a change. And I love podcasting. I love the podcast. I don't listen to all of them. I listen to the ones that attract me, but I think there's just this, isn't it nice just to hear what, Andy has to say, Marty has to say, Rick has to say. It's not like, we're putting out a piece going, with
you can be honest and just say how you feel. You're not reading the script. So it's great,
Right.
And I think it's up to us to take in information and then decide how we use it and what we think after the fact. And people have lost that skill. I guess the younger generations have lost that skill. As a mom to a couple Gen Zs, I think that they need to spend a little bit of time developing their information searches, and really saying, said this, I'm going to now check on that information, make sure it's true. And then maybe I'll add that to my little pot of knowledge and then go from there, Right. So that's how we try to raise our.
Well, it's critical thinking skills, you know what I mean? Where you go, it's okay to think, I think it's okay when somebody says, blah, 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 then I get to go, I don't know. But what we've kind of done in our culture is, well, you can't ask that. And I think it's really bad since COVID is, now there's so many areas where they think you can't question people. And we've kind of taught people to be afraid of asking questions because if you do, they'll start calling you, in my case, I've been called a homophobe, a racist, transphobe, a MAGA, a far right wing. And that's because, and I'm none of those things, but and the problem that they have is when you do that enough, I stop caring. And then that's when they're in trouble because now it's like, well, you know what? You took the meaning out of the word. If you call somebody something for so long that it does, and it doesn't stick, the sticker doesn't stick. And so then you stand back and you go, you can say what you need to, but it doesn't work for me. And why are we so threatened by people thinking differently than we?
Right. And when you have to label it, the labels kill. That's what kills thought and conversation is labeling. That's not really a fact. You're just calling me a name. So if you can withstand the name calling, then you can continue to have meaningful conversations. And that's what it boils down to. But I also try to watch it happens on both sides. It really does. And we've been trained to name call to maintain control of a conversation. And that's not debate. It's not discussion. It's not meaningful discourse. So we need to watch the name calling and really exchange. I totally agree with that. I think it's silly.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it too is like this kind of where it comes to like the idea of corporatocracy is like the idea of scale. So you were talking about how people would be and I saw this years ago. I wasn't even in the business, but I understood that if you were in media, you started kind of in the local market and you would move around. So you wouldn't have roots. If you work for a large corporation, a lot of times your upward mobility requires relocation. If you want to really make a large company pop, it's about scale. It's about how big can you make it? How can you replicate this machine on a large enough scale to make a little bit of a profit but it's such a scale that, wow, that's great. But it takes away the creativity. It takes away the connection to community. It takes away you're just talking about, you thinking about that you're invested in the community because you are a part of it legitimately, not as a tagline. Take that out and say, I'm not from here. I'm Rick Dancer from somewhere far, far away. I'm here for 2 years to make myself look good and move on. Your motivation, how you do things, what you do is going to be so less beneficial to the community than the other way around. And I think flaws as I may have, I've always kind of tried to say, I think this is right or wrong. Big picture. Now, as I get older, I'm really just focused on a small group of people. I can only have so many conversations. So many people are not going to want to hear it. So I just want to talk to the people that are open-minded to it. So I think that's where the real power comes from. It's like if we focus in on the people that are open, that want to hear, that don't, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a lot of people that want those 30-second sound bites and the real feel-good stories because it's not going to ruin their party to have to think about something beyond that.
Right.
But if we can just evolve beyond that, accept what it is, be ourselves and be organic, then we bring back that power and that potency that I feel is completely void.
Yeah. I have also learned, like with criticism from other people, usually, like if you really look at it and dissect it a little bit, you realize that these are unhappy people and they don't like themselves and they're just taking, I just had one tonight before I came on your guys' and they'll come on and say something and you go, gosh, what would that be like to have a life like that where you're that angry that it doesn't, the question was something else. And you come on and say, well, some old guy like you, who cares what you have to say? But that kind of, I guess for me, it fuels me to want to ask more questions, to want to be, because I think people are starving for the truth right now. And it's not your personal truth or what, I feel like this. It's like there's truth and there's lies. And I think people are, I was telling you guys, I was listening to a podcast this morning about Nixon and Watergate. And the stuff that went on during Nixon and Watergate with the media, it is exactly like right now. I mean, with Trump and Kamala and this whole thing, which was kind of shocking to me because that's when I was, like a little kid, and I wasn't even a journalist then, and I thought this new form of, lawfare and all this kind of stuff is all new, and it started then. So it's been going on. We just haven't seen it, and now it's right in our face of what's happening here. So I feel like for us as people, we have to be our own journalists. You have to go out there and find out and ask questions. And then you don't have to there's a great line in the Bible. It says, only if a fool tells all he knows. I love that because you don't have to tell everything you know. And with some people, it's they don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear anything. They're going to go right back to their line, and so I guess it is also, I have many great lines from the Bible that I love. Is the other one is, don't throw your pearls before swine. The little points of wisdom you have, like you said, Marty, give those to your trusted people, the people that really want to learn in your audience and that kind of stuff. And then naysayers, these are valuable things that I'm casting them out. And pigs, I raised pigs for a while for 4-H with my kids. It's like, they'll eat anything. They don't care. And they'll just poop that pearl right out the back end. They don't recognize the value of it. So why are we giving our amazing things in our lives to people who don't really want it and are just going to poop it out? It's I don't know. I think it's exciting, honestly.
It's like Viva La Podcast, right? Because then you can do whatever you want. You can talk about what you want. And the people who want to hear what you have to say come to you. So it works out for everyone, really.
There's always there is a cost, I mean, I think you guys, I'm sure you've seen that. There is a cost when, you have to, I never want to be so thick-skinned that I don't feel life, and people. And this business and this industry tends to do the opposite, where it's a hide tanner, and it can really, and you can become a little bit cynical over things because, I struggle with trust, but I think the good thing is the more podcasts like yours and mine and other people's come out, it gives folks an opportunity to kind of be in just a normal place and not, nobody relates to David Muir on, ABC News. I'm David Muir and I've had my hair perfectly coiffed and my agent said that I should talk more like this because this is what people will listen to. It's like it's show business, and it has no business in calling itself news. This is entertainment.
It almost makes me. It just made me think. I was thinking that people for a long time have kind of lost, in my opinion, the ability to interact organically, and I feel like that lack of authenticity is kind of amplified in the media world, if you will. And it's almost like what podcasting has done in a sense is it's created this pipeline, this way for people to connect organically, remotely, and have real conversation and discuss real issues and think about questions. And I've been listening to so much lately, and I've thought people have gotten so much better at just having honest, open conversations. And I think that's incredible. We need that so much, and that's where I see it happening on podcasts.
Yeah.
Frankly,
I do on Mondays and Wednesday nights. I know there's some people aren't going to agree with this, but I got on TikTok because I wanted to see what this is. I'm going, I got to check this out, and I think the government will get it straightened out with China and all that stuff. Most people,
they're going to be on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram. They're in.
Right. I'll tell you, Facebook drives me crazy because that's all that is it's turned into a bunch of people bitching at each other all the time. It's like, I could go and say, I really like gray hair. Gray hair means you're this and you're suck and you have to have brown hair if you're going to fit it. All this kind of stuff. And Instagram's pretty pictures and, little sayings and stuff like that. But I do these shows, so they're just live. I just go live and I don't have it. It's so funny because it just says, Rick Dancer, come talk. And then I go on and I get thousands and thousands of people from all over the world, Brazil, Puerto Rico, the Philippines. It's always morning when I do my show. Well, hi, good morning, Rick Dancer. It's 7 a.m. here in the Philippines. And then people come on and everybody kind of knows the gig. I just start, I just talk. I see their questions. I say, ask me what you want. And then you get people going, so what's this podcast? What's this live about? I said, it's about you. It's about whatever you want it to be. Well, no, but what's the point? Relationship, talking, seeing what people think. Well, you have to have a point. No, we don't. We just kind of do it. There are people and they'll just leave. But then you get these people on there and they'll just go, so what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And here's a question. And what's so nice about that for me with TikTok is because it's not Montana or Oregon where I live. These are people from all over the world, and it's Florida, and you get people from the South. And honey, what are you doing? And it opens up this thing. And last night I got on a real big rant, a political thing, and I thought they were going to shut me down because they've shut me down before for other stuff. And you got to be really careful on there because if you say when Santa, at Christmas time one time, I said, ho, ho, ho. And they shut me down saying I was calling people a hoe.
Oh my gosh.
So for like a week, I couldn't do a show because they said I was disturbing the community, and it was like, it was the weirdest thing, but it really, and what I see on there and what we talk about when we're on there is that people, I think we're all, especially after COVID, we're kind of starving for relationships, meaningful. And even though I know, I'm not going to see Brian from Brazil, that they come on regular. I got a guy from Wisconsin that comes on and we argue about who has the best cheese. And I'm going, Wisconsin cheese is just crap. And it's a joke. But he goes, no, Oregon, that Oregon cheese is terrible. So then people start piping in and going, I like Wisconsin cheese. I go, no, that's just Jim. And then Jim goes, well, Rick drives a Subaru. And I go, no, because I don't drive a Subaru. And we make fun of Subarus. But it's like all of us just kind of talking. And I go home and my wife goes, oh, you did a TikTok show tonight. I said, how can you tell? She goes, because you seem just really relaxed. And it's like, yeah, because I'm investing in a conversation and I'm enjoying people again. You know what I mean? And I think that's what you and, Andy, Marty, me, Joe Rogan, other people, they might have, more information or something on certain things. But we all have this place where it's just people coming on to go, they're curious and we need to build, I think, on that curiosity encourage it, like with our children is to, yes, the world is like this big thing and don't let anybody tell you, when I was in college, and I hope I'm not, I hope this is okay. I don't know. I was in college and I had a teacher and she said, you're not a very good writer, and you need to work on that. And I went, okay, and then I had a news director one time and he said, Rick, like I said earlier, if you can learn to write like you talk, you'll be golden. And I started practicing that. And in Oregon, I got the best news writing award 15 years in a row, which I'd like to go back to that teacher and say, thank you, but you were wrong too. But what it was is, what it was? It wasn't like I was so profound with my writing and stuff, but I know how to connect with someone's heart when I write. Even like my wife, we just had an anniversary and I just wrote this little thing on Facebook with her picture and some stuff like that. And it was the comment she made to me was just sweeter than what I wrote. I thought that she skipped back and she goes, Rick, you always, publicly, and she doesn't do that very often. She says, you really have a way with words. You know how to go in and connect with people like that. And, so if we could teach people to do that and then be able to do it on podcasting and be able to go, no, you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican. But what's your dream? What do you dream about? What do you want to do when what's really important to you?
I think we forgot that that's possible. And I grew up in a world where everyone voted differently and we all still had dinner every Sunday and we still had the neighbors over and nobody thought about politics. You could talk about it all day long, but nobody fought. And it's nice to see that returning just based off of talking and conversation. You whispered about down there. I see.
Well, what it made me think is that I'm kind of ruined, I think, when it comes to small talk, like just terrible. And the conversations that I have with people, I work with a lot of different people, and the conversations we have are all over the place, all different kinds of ideas. I walk away often laughing, feeling good, learning something. Can't believe I know these people. I can't believe these are the conversations we have. And it's great. And I think that connection, however it comes, can only bring good things, because the more shut off in our boxes we are, the more divided we are because we're sensitive about this. I'm not saying anybody have your beliefs, but be open, engage, exchange. You don't have to pick a team and then defend the team because you're on the team. Have some ideas, have some nuance. Two parties, maybe that's not enough. Diversity is a great thing biologically. Why can't we have diverse political parties? Why can't we have diverse news organizations? I just say this, Rick. I want to get your thoughts on this because this is kind of structurally. I'm thinking about it seems like a big challenge in that I was a kid that grew up, public housing, welfare, single mom stuff. So my rebellion was I was 18 before I went in the military. I'm listening to somebody turn me on to Rush Limbaugh. And I was hooked, right? So you can imagine my rebellion is to go against that system and to be really conservative, whatever. And then over the years, I've kind of, funny, it's really the last handful of years. I wouldn't say I'm liberal, but I'm more open. I'll say that. But I think about it, and I think about how do you put together the infrastructure, the apparatus to make local media, organic, true, genuine local media possible, if not for something like this? Is there, because this is important, this is good. A lot of people getting online, telling their story and asking questions, but is there a way in your mind with the limited ownership of media and the financial realities to find a way to make it work again?
You see, yeah, now here's one thing. Yeah, you bring up that's a great topic. I have seen that in small town newspapers. If you look around the country, not like in Eugene, they have one called the Register Guard. And it was so biased that everybody always, they used to call it the Red Guard, not meaning politically red, meaning socialist. Yeah. And then a big company came in, bought it, and its viewership has just died. But then you have smaller towns like Springfield, Oregon, Crestwell, Oregon, these little papers where people still get their information. You know what I mean? And so I think in smaller towns, they're doing it because, a podcast or something like that's not going to fill that void of having a record of what's going on. I think so they can, maybe what needs to happen in terms of newspapers is these bigger communities need to see, what are they doing this right? Well, you know what they're doing? They're covering basketball games, and little Brian Johnson, Bill Johnson's son, who Bill owns a little store down the street. He won the AAA high school championship basketball game. They're going to events showing the community, and then have somebody at the city council meeting reporting on that. And when there's a recall, and so they're getting that local news. I think that I was really surprised by that, because remember, newspapers were dying, and they still are. But I'm watching in Oregon when I was there anyway, and we have the same thing here in Montana. But smaller papers are still surviving, and in some cases thriving, because they found a way, their niche, and they know that they're needed. You know what I mean? That information is needed. For television news, I think it's going to die. I really do. It's been on a slow death for years that I've watched, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And I just don't think, when you get anybody my age, they're still watching it. I don't, but there's still people my age. But 30 and below, they don't watch TV news. They don't even know what it is. They're not, that's not in there. We grew up with Walter Cronkite when I was a kid, and you see him on there, and you had 3 stations, and you watched the news at night. Your parents watched it after dinner or whatever, before dinner. And that became part of your life. And when I worked in it, it was the same way. I'd have more people, and they didn't really watch. They'd have it on, and I'd see them at the grocery store, and they'd see me, and they just didn't recognize me. But then the clerk would say something. I go, "Oh yeah, how are you?" And they go, "Oh, you're Rick Dancer. I recognize your voice. I hear you on the news every night." So that was built into our structure. It's not built into the structure anymore. And if you watch their numbers, they're just dropping off continually. So I think they're going to die. What will that be replaced with? I think even the evening news will die. And you see things like Newsmax and these others coming in. So I think some of that may catch on and connect, not just left. I think left wing, hopefully you can get some, I don't know. I don't watch Newsmax either, but hopefully you'll get some people in to, I don't know how we restore fairness in any of this, because I think we're so sided right now. And maybe this is just a time in life we have to go through this. My own personal feeling is that the internet's going to just take it over. It'll become, and the bad thing about it, if you could get somebody to do both, be really fair and do that old fashioned kind of journalism, that would be great. I think that's going to take some time, because we're so, the audiences are so, I don't think there's a ton of people that want to see, they say they do, but I think a lot of people that watch stuff, I think they want to see their team. You said that really well, Marty. I think we become a team sport in politics, and they want to see their team win. And I don't think, I hang out, I'm a little more right of center than and there's people here that would say, "Oh, you're far right," but I ask lots of questions. And so I look at left wing stuff to find out what they're thinking, and say, "Oh, okay." And I listen to some of their talk shows, and read their stuff, and it keeps me more understanding. It makes me like my position even better. But I'm also the guy that says, I'm asking questions about, how come, Robert, I don't know if you guys saw it, at the taping of this broadcasting, there was an article today where Robert Kennedy, they said RFK is offering his endorsement to either candidate, for a position in there. And then it comes out, no, that's not true. Well, I saw it on CNN, and I'm going, so that just proves that I don't believe CNN anymore. But stuff like that's coming, and I think you have to then digest it. But the nice thing for me was putting that out there, that somebody came out and said, well, I saw something else that said that wasn't. So then I go looking for that. And that's the fun part, because, I'm having that dialogue with people. But I don't think most people really want to do that. I think they just want to see their team. So maybe it's just a sorting out of maybe, I see great hope in not Gen Z, no offense, Gen Zers, but the next generation down. I see so many kids that are like, they've been through COVID, they saw all this stuff, and they are not going to just put up with people telling them what to do. Right. And I love that, because I think that the generation in between and all of us have gotten, just kind of soured on all this. But these kids are sitting there and they're asking questions, and I mean, good questions. And I get a ton of those kids on my page, and saying stuff. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't know that. I didn't even think about that. And it's like, well, thank you for thinking. You're thinking.
I think the younger Gen Z, there's hope, because we have a daughter. She's very thoughtful, and she does consider a lot of things. And that generation, they will question it all. Yeah. And I think from then on, we save things.
Yes. Well, but it's not just their fault. It's because as a culture, I think, me, gave our kids everything they needed, and thinking that was what they needed, when really it's, everything. A lot of the podcasts I'm listening to is like, you don't learn, and you and I know this, and Marty and Andy, I mean, we've all lived through this. Tough shit is what makes you, when you fail, it's not really failing. That's setting a different direction. I failed so much, in my life, and I was a really successful news anchor, and everything went really well for many, many years. And then I couldn't do it anymore, because it wasn't me. It was fake. And it was becoming, they wanted me to be a pretty boy, and I just couldn't do it, because I always had been involved in what I did. So I saw a way to quit, and I ran. If you're going to get out of television, best way to do it is run for public office, because if you think it was hard in TV, you get into public office and they just actually castrate you. Anything you thought good about yourself, gone. They made me into this, handsome, fluffy reporter who did, it was just like, I'd look in the papers and go, this is just not me. But it was 9 months of that, and I almost won. But it was 9 months, and I learned really quick to put your head down and just go forward. You know what I mean? No matter what they said, and and I didn't just put up with it. I'd fight them. There was people that would try to make me into, a certain type of candidate or something, and I go, no, that's not. You don't get to do that. And then then we struggled. We started a business, and having your own business is hard. We struggled, and then it did successful, then it went down, and then it was successful. Then we started podcasting, that went up, then it went down, then it went up. And I've learned more from my failures than I ever have learned from being successful. And I would never go back, to living under the rule of people telling me. And, you come up with an idea, and you'd go to the news director and say, hey, what if we tried this? And one news director was really good, but the other ones were like, well, here's all the things that could go wrong. And it's like, so when I had my own business, it's like, I come up with an idea, I'm going to try that. And then it would flop, and I'd stop and do something else. And then, oh, that worked. Okay. And then you get to a point, you're going, okay, now I'm building everything on this idea. And then all of a sudden that stops, and you go, okay, people have changed. So now I go over here. Now I'm doing this, and it's my last name is Dancer. And I felt like most of my life I have been dancing. It's and always ready to move with the partner, whatever that is, if it's God or whoever. I'm partnering with them and going, okay, what's the next thing? And I'm there right now. I'm 65, and it's like, I don't want to stop working. I can, but I want to find that new thing. And I that excites me, about life and stuff. So Anyway,
You'll never retire. I've seen this type of energy before. The two of you will never retire. And that's
no, I don't think, I look in the Bible and I see Moses like 900 years old, and it's like he's leading people through the desert. And it's like, yeah, he had to put up with their whining and sniveling and bitching and making calves and altars and, smacking. I'm sure he got pissed. He has the 10 Commandments comes down and goes, you bunch of dumbasses, and smacks that over their head. I mean, I'm sure, but it's like, but you're alive, you're vibrant, you're participating in life. And I think that's what what podcasting and being involved in our communities, I think that's what this does, is it gives you an opportunity to have a voice. And if you lose that, or I don't even think, I think people try to steal it, both parties try to steal your voice. So you got to fight to keep it. But I think the bigger problem in our country is people are giving it away. They're giving their voice away rather than, nobody's taking it from you. You can still use it, but what are you willing to pay to have the kind of peace in your life that it takes to open your mouth and say, that didn't work for me.
Well, I can really relate on the pretty boy thing because I get that a lot. But I was thinking about two things. One is you were saying about not wanting to retire, and I thought, especially getting older, when I was coming up in the corporate space, there was always this mantra, and you see it on TV. There's going to be somebody younger, hungrier, it's going to work for less. And then it kind of sort of didn't really materialize. But I thought, now that I'm on, I thought there's so much experience and value. Why would you want people 65 plus to not be participating in the economy? I get it if you don't want to grind, but that's who I want to go to for advice. I don't want to take people out of the brain trust and say, good job, go away. We're going to listen to the guy half your age who hasn't been there or done that. That doesn't make any sense to me. Right. But I think when it comes to the speaking, I think the good news is, like, we went from this idea of groupthink to, like, I feel like, and I really felt like I lived it, but for the last 4 years, roughly, it went from groupthink to like a momentum thing. It was just this kind of, everybody's going his way. And when you would stop and you'd ask a question or you push back, it was offensive to people. They were offended. They thought you were crazy. But what I've noticed now, a lot of the people that I felt like, frankly, they weren't respectful because I had a different opinion about COVID and they were sure they were right. I get that. I've made bad calls, right? But, I feel like now people are at least a little more comfortable with the idea of saying, wait a minute, let me ask a question. Wait a minute, let me think about that.
Right.
It's okay if you disagree. Why do you disagree? I'm not saying we're at this point where we need to be, but I feel like we're kind of on that path.
Yeah. I'm reading this book, and it's somebody suggested it to me, and it's really interesting. And it's not religious. It's called Outwitting the Devil, and it was written in the 1930s. And the guy who wrote it never released it. He and his wife said, we will never release this book until we're both dead, because the churches, the schools, the government will come after us. And this book, and I've had people tell me, like, they put it down because it was so like it scared them so much, But I'm like, it's called Outwitting the Devil, and
gotta read that.
Hard. It's a hard. The beginning of it is a hard read because this guy's from the 1930s, so he's writing in, back in the day. But I'm just now into the devil conversation, and so he gets the power over the devil that the devil has to tell him how he does what he does, and he says his trick is, his real magic is fear. If you can get people afraid, I can get control of their mind. And he says he goes, that's what it is. It's fear. So and he says the most fearful times in people's lives are things they're afraid of is getting older, dying, poverty. I can't remember. There's like 6, but they're all things that people get really afraid of. So if he can get them in that position or to that place thinking, oh gosh, if I give up my job at KEZI TV and run for public office, and I lose, I got nothing because I can't go back to news because now I've outed myself as a Republican. So I can't go back into television news. So what do? People ask me on the campaign all the time, what's your plan B? And I said, I don't have a plan B because if I have a plan B, my plan A is not serious. So but getting you in that position, then the fear comes in like that. See, and then, so as I'm reading this, I'm going, oh my God, this guy is writing this in 1938. And here we are. And in the book, the devil's talking about how he used the Depression, World Wars to get people really scared, and then he could get a hold of them. And I thought the pandemic, like get everybody afraid. We tell you what we want you to do, and then you'll give up. Look what we gave up for that. I mean, like people like education wise and children wise and freedom wise and all that stuff. And you think, so, for me, like in my life, I'm not recommending the book or anything. I'm just saying for me, it's been really interesting because I start looking at my own life and going, I've got some changes coming up here right now. I'm considering some different things. And I'm thinking, Rick, if you're fearful, then you're going to open the door to I'm not saying necessarily the devil. I'm just saying, but to evil. You open the door to, what if I don't do this? And it was the thing that, in my world, a God-fearing guy, what if God's going, here, what are you willing to give? What do you want? Huh? What do you want to do? You asked me, do you want to go do this? You want to go try it? Because you can fall and skin your knees, but what's the worst thing that can happen, Rick, really? And going, because if I fear, so you know what I mean? So if you're I don't know why I'm on this tangent, but it's because I'm doing it. But if you're sitting here thinking, if I'm open to change, and I'm sitting here going, God, I want something different, and here's this door, and then if I know, the possibility on this other side, if I fear it, I'm inviting in evil to come in and get me all, so I'm comfortable, and look at your money. Rick, you're making some good money, right? You give that up, and what's going to happen like this? So I've got, on one hand, I've got security and comfort, and I can just retire, and and this, and on this other side is, look at what God did with Abraham. Abraham was living a great life. He got wife, got stature, got money, got everything. And God comes and says, I want to take you on a little adventure. I'm going to make a nation, and you're going to be the father of that entire nation. And then his life goes to shit, and everything, but it becomes the adventure of his life. So what if that's, what we're all supposed to be doing is going, what if this podcast, Marty and Andy, is the adventure of your life? And who cares how many people watch it or what they do with it? And you will touch people because of who you are, but you will touch people. But what if you don't do it? What if you're so afraid and we say, I'm not going to put that into this because, it's just not working. Well, you don't know. You don't know who it's working for. So I think I kind of feel like that's where all this, stuff is going, is to wake us up as people and say, look what people are capable of taking from you. And when you let people take something from you, you're an accomplice because you actually gave it to them. And so instead, what you should do is first figure out what it is you need to do, and then just put your head down. And I don't mean down. I mean, keep your head up. You got to keep your head up because you got to see the shit that's coming flying. Because if poop's going to fly in my face, I want to see and I want to know where it's coming from. You know what I mean? So if it's coming at me, I got to do it. But there's also that firm, I sometimes feel like, you put your head down, you kind of move like that, like you got your eyes up, you're focused on the horizon. But I do that when I ride my bikes. I ride mountain bikes with my wife. We go on these hills, and it's like, you will go where you focus. Like, oh, look at that. And all of a sudden I'm going off a cliff, So if you focus ahead, like 20 feet ahead of where you are, you don't look straight down, you're looking 20 feet ahead. So you know a little bit what's coming, but you're not looking 10 miles ahead, and you're not looking left and right. That's why they put those blinders on horses, because you don't need to be looking over here. You look straight forward and where you're going. And I feel like that's where culture is right now. It's like, there's a ton of us who are not drifters. This book calls the people who are easily fearful, they call them drifters. And then he says that's 98% of the people, and the other 2% are us. And the people who are willing to go, that might hurt, but the pain of not doing it would be way worse than just trudging straight forward and headfirst right into it, and then see what happens.
No, I love it. I think that's great.
Yeah, I was going to say, normally I would be like, we're coming up on the end.
Almost a sermon. Almost.
Yeah.
You're like, I feel like the spirit, like just going.
That was brilliant. Normally I would,
Great.
I want to end this with something else, but I think what you said was genius. And the idea of fear and that, engaging life and being full and being whole and being organic, I love it. And I can't think that it would be worth it to compromise that for some make-believe magic coins or coupons of money or whatever it is. I think that the more of us are true to who we are,
yep,
who we are.
I talked to a philosophy professor one time for a story, and it had nothing to do with the story that I asked him, but we were just sitting there, and I thought, God, I should just ask this guy something. So I said, what do you think life is all about? And he says, Rick, life is about learning to be comfortable with discomfort. And I went, oh my God. If I could get to the point where when things are uncomfortable, I'm comfortable with uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then that's a game changer. I mean, because then you can do anything. It's like, yeah, things are going to get uncomfortable. Well, I'm fine with that. I'm comfortable with that. Because I've seen, and I think that's getting older too, like you were saying earlier. It's getting older because you can see past, what's going to happen tomorrow. You have to go, what's going to happen in 3 weeks or a year or a month or whatever, But it's...
I was having this thought of like, living to get to a point as opposed to being in a process and living with purpose. Like most of my life, it was to get to a point,
Right.
Started that process as a kid. Well, I want to get out of here. I want to get away from this. I want to get to this point or that point. And then it maintained this pattern. Well, if I get to this position or that income or this, whatever. And I feel like that is a very restrictive, limiting way to live. Whereas today, whatever today is my process, my purpose, and that's okay. And I'm going to be here right now.
I like that. Because you had a rough childhood.
Yeah. Wasn't great. But I think that a lot of the things that I'm looking at that I'm experiencing, I can kind of tie back to that. So I think if you're just aware, then you can break patterns and habits. And even if, you set a lot of things in your mind, and I don't know your childhood, but I'm guessing struggles and challenges and things. And, if you're not aware of it, and I think I'm just becoming aware of how programmed I am from the escape process, right?
Right. That's what this book, Marty, this book is like, that's what it's open. I mean, it is. It's so weird because I'm realizing how many things I believe because that's what I was told.
Yeah.
Rather than allowing, for me in my world, allowing God to just go, God, Rick, come on, man. What do you, I had this plan when I made you. And I knew all this stuff was going to go on. I didn't plan for that to go on, but I used it to get you to this place to where you are and doing this kind of thing. And so what do you want to do? I mean, you want to jump. And that's the part where, I'm slowly, and I have a really great wife. Like she's really good at, like I went home tonight and I found this company, they want me to do some stuff for them. And they said, well, for X amount of dollars, we can cut up and make little reels for you and blah, 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 blah. And it's a really good, I think it would be really good for me and my business and my podcast and my timber series. So I said, honey, they said, if you let them know within a day that this is your price and stuff like that. And so I love my wife. She just looked at me, she goes, well, why don't we just try it? It's a month to month. So why don't you just try it for, 6 months and see how it works. And then if it doesn't, we can just stop. And otherwise, and I just went, oh. And so it's like taking that step and going, okay, let's see how this works. And, she's really good about that. So I think that's kind of, that's where we're good, good partnership is up, because she doesn't do anything I do like this. She runs our business, all the, financial stuff and all that. And, so that's been the hardest thing for us leaving Oregon and, getting out. It was the best thing. And we know that's what we were supposed to do, but it's like just meeting people in a new state, with a whole different, kind of attitude and stuff like that. It's been, I mean, I'm in Oregon, I walk in a room and I can just go, people go, I go home and be silent, back to Oregon, people go, Rick, how you doing? And all this. And here it's like you come in and you're having to introduce yourself and like this whole new thing, I'm going up to people, hey, how are you? And they're going, and Kathy goes, I think you're being too forward. And I'm saying, well, I'm desperate for people. There's a kid at our gym. He's like 40 years old, but he's a super nice guy. He was real quiet, and we started, getting kind of talking to each other. Now we've become good friends and stuff, but he was never like obnoxious like me. And then the other day he comes up, and I was gone for like a week, and he comes up to me, and I was so proud of him because he was so bad. He was so mean. But he walks up to me and he goes, oh my God, I'm so glad you're here. I thought the senior citizens bus broke down. I was going to offer you a ride. And I looked at him and said, Justin, I just love you, man. You are so mean. That is so perfect. He goes, I know, only you would like that about somebody, right? I said,
I'll end with this. When we moved from New Jersey, I'm from New York, she's from New Jersey. When we moved to Virginia, there was this kind of mourning period I had because people weren't insulting me enough, And I literally got sad. I was like, oh, they're being polite, and I miss that, the realness.